Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Aliana Kernodle. President Donald Trump signed an executive order last week outlawing what the White House termed radical indoctrination in K-12 schools. Joining me to tell us more about this is Chalkboard News editor Brennan Clary. Brennan, what are some of the details of this order?
Yeah, so it's a big sea change from the Biden administration. I think that's kind of been the underlying theme of a lot of the Trump administration's actions in the last few weeks, is to try to undo a lot of what the Biden administration had been doing, which I don't think is a big surprise. And it's just been a whirlwind trying to catch up a lot of the different kinds of orders or different kinds of statements from the Department of Education. But we've seen a big sea change in terms of how it's approaching gender ideology and what it calls discriminatory equity ideology. The new executive order calls on agency secretaries in the Biden administration to submit, quote, an ending indoctrination strategy. So that's their language there. And the idea behind that is to eliminate, quote, federal funding or support for illegal and discriminatory treatment and indoctrination in K-12 schools, including based on gender ideology and discriminatory equity ideology. So they're targeting these concepts that I think a lot of red states have already sort of tried to outlaw, this idea of like culturally divisive race theory, like critical race theory, different kinds of gender ideology, and sort of this idea that maybe you have inequality based on your characteristics. And so they're targeting these kinds of frameworks through any government contract. And so it's trying to top down looking for this kind of what I call radical indoctrination, and then trying to root it out systematically. So that is essentially what the order is trying to do. It's again, with a lot of these executive orders, it's not like, here's the action that we're going to take. It's like, here's what we are going to ask our agencies to submit a plan or like do a review and see what we're going to do and then take that action in a later time. So it's not like this is directly calling to, like, as we've seen in other executive orders, like for the removal of all federal grants to stop while we figure it out. So, that caused a lot of upheaval. We don't have that sort of direct action here, but we do have a very intentional, calling for these kinds of plans to investigate, right, all federal funding that, quote, directly or indirectly support or subsidize the instruction, advancement, or promotion of gender ideology or discriminatory equity ideology. And that applies to either K-12 curricula, instruction and activities, as well as K-12 teacher education, certification training, licensing, or employment training. So basically professional development for teachers or curricula for students. Like, we don't want to have any kind of this, what the Trump administration calls, radical gender ideology or discriminatory equity ideology. So these kinds of things that we've written about in federally funded equity webinars, I think that would definitely fall under what the Trump administration is trying to target here. For example, that, you can have different social identity characteristics that influence your power and privilege, as being an oppressor and oppressed based on your, immutable characteristics, or school districts like Seattle Public Schools using social identity wheels to have students reflect on their privilege, or, and that's based on income, race, mental health, sexual identity, and religion, like these kind of immutable characteristics, and that they're protected by federal law as well. So I think that that's directly what the Trump administration is targeting, and that kind of there's a lot of focus on equity from the Biden administration. So it is a huge sea change in that effect.
And sort of on similar lines, the Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Education issued a Dear Colleague letter outlining its stance on Title IX. What did they have to say?
Yeah, so the Dear Colleague letter is sent to every school district in the nation, and basically says this is what the Department of Education's approach is going to be. And they also, huge sea change from the Biden administration. Again, not really a big surprise, but they're saying we will not recognize at all the 2024 Title IX rule that the Biden administration was trying very hard to implement until a federal judge struck it down earlier this year. So that is, it's not a huge, like, we are undoing everything. It's sort of just like, hey, we're letting you know that we'll no longer be doing this. So from the Department of Education standpoint, it is an official, like, the tides have changed. Like, we're going a different direction with Title IX enforcement. It kind of goes along with the Trump administration's focus on, redefining sex as male and female, and these immutable characteristics, like and these different kinds of executive orders from the Trump administration. So that directive says it's in compliance with the Trump administration. So, and it, again, criticized the Biden administration in effect and said that, they didn't have a proper and textual meaning of or understanding of Title IX. So that was another thing. They said that the judge in the case where it was struck down, that federal judge expressed the proper textual and original meaning of Title IX and praised that decision. And it also, said that as a constitutional matter, quote, the president's interpretation of the law, Title IX, governs because he alone controls and supervises subordinate officers who exercise discretionary executive power on his behalf. That unified control extends to the Education Department and the Office of Civil Rights. Therefore, Title IX must be enforced consistent with President Trump's executive order. And that executive order is on sex characteristics, on saying that there are two sexes, male and female. And again, like a very different sea change from the Biden administration, and that they intend to uphold the 2020 Title IX rules and not the 2024. And there was a lot of praise from critics of the Biden administration's changes. So the Southeastern Legal Foundation actually has a ongoing litigation against the Biden administration for its rewrite, they call it, of the Title IX rules. So they were very, very excited to see the Department of Education's kind of official position change on this. And the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, the FIRE, the free speech organization, they were more supportive of it in terms of the higher education aspect. So that's something that we don't usually write about at Chalkboard News, because it's a little bit out of our purview. But there's some changes that are important that govern the rights of due process and for students at this higher education level. So that's going back to the 2020 rules. That is a big change in terms of how colleges and universities are to handle allegations of sexual assault under Title IX. So there's a lot of different things that go into this at the K-12 and also higher education level.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.